Yake hati adi. Ya yaki. Quash kasaku aya. Deyi qik. Qawikach tullatin. Quash kelkach tullatin. Hechosaku. Helfotisku aya adusa ekwadlaq. Yachana. Quash kel adat tishte. Itishte helwasaka kwati. Ye awa achtuasaku yachana we Táax'aa shkalniki adat ʼatutli.átk qayejik qone. Qa qal achidigach kagachinik dasa ituasaku. Ya hashkunyi jine achtuasaku. Trigu kinki adate yak qosai. Ye awa achtuyik Wooch hayati ayaki. Takat yuan. Kun chish qual qadawu saya GAT. Yisikuke wasatu sak yadis. Keltis klein, keltis yadi. Yisikuke.
Kukahadis.
Yeah, awa kukahadis aya. Hujoe dis klein. Kukahadis. Oh. Qual yatayach hechosaku. Yisat qa gleich dich nas. Iksha. Gleich dich nas krachun kejin saidishu dachadishu. Yadu Kunya ki sawi awasiyetes. Yewe naski ki awachi yades. Yak yeki sawi yaki qoa. Dech yeki. Kelkadeni acht. Ichwa ach. Wait. Yak egum chish. Wasa kurti. Uksaye ieti. Wasa kurti. Okay. Johan qa?
Kusiat.
Yeah, well. Yatutata we tleshkadenu what hiti.
Tlingit Nov Usitan.
Okay. Tatke konachawe Tlingit Nov Usitan. Tlidziaya at wudukuchu. Kadeen aya at khwasakuch. Ya yaki kwalkinak ein. Acho wasadu sago at naat aka naat akadu usko at aya yacheti we de washboard you do sago at let khak inach man qarin zakhakhaya yizakhuch we kajucha shtakadech de tuasugu yikakwati. Okay. Gonna cheese.
Gunashtish Kune Yeyawaka Wasa Duasak pumpkin. E Alun Yanak Saklain and Galiktin. I put in the chat a link. Yakatanki, Yakatang, de Wisconsin. And
Oh, here, go to us a go. To Achi. Oh,
right there.
right there.
And we can hear it. There's a button.
Okusiman? Okusiman? Okusiman?
Okosimang.
En Dani sugi kubosanan okusimanan.
Okosimanan. Here, Chosatin, my plural. Okosiman. Sheesh. Yuk A. Yeah, we Táax'aa, Shkashnika, Guksa Yehayati, Kagudesa, Kagudachsa, Chaltakatat, Yatayach. Akawi, Quash just waita, Chudachnach, we Jakutaga, Yijini, Atayach was it, Hot A, Bunchish. Thanks everybody for coming. Just a quick recap. Hope you voted already, and maybe we're watching it. If you got one eye on the results, that's totally fine. It can be kind of consuming, but if you want to just not think about it, we're probably not even going to talk about it, because who knows what's going to happen. We won't know by the end of this class. So this, I'm fine if you're peeking at the numbers and looking at what's happened. And I'm also fine if you just want to just dive into Tlingit and not even think about it. So we'll just keep on track with what we're doing and choose your own path as far as what you absorb with the election results. It's a new month. It's a digging around month is basically what that means. So the animals start really scratching things up. It probably has a lot to do with a bear that eats probably a lot of roots and stuff before it starts going into hibernation. So we switched over from Disclain. So we started at Shah Nachdis, which is the Shah Disi, which is the mountain shadow month. Then we went to Disyadi, which was a little moon month. It's child moon. So a bunch of things can be Yadi, and that just means small. And then Disclain, the big moon month. And now we're in Kukahadis. And then we kind of talked about it's the third day, so 3 days have passed. This month, it's the second day of the week, so it's Tuesday. And then we kind of talked about the plan tonight, so we're gonna look again at these direction and location things, a couple new. I found the napkin that I think I shared with you folks that we had kind of drawn on a napkin in Teslin. Shkuyesh Tim Hall gets the credit for this because he was really trying to unravel some of this stuff, and he just started making these little categories, and I'll make a cleaner version of it, maybe with some drawings and stuff. And then we're going to get back into the Táax'aa story. I actually found a project I started in 2007, and so working with Dick Dowenhauer, one of his ideas was trying to create these kind of interactive movies or websites. He was a super old school dude, but he liked to sort of dream about these things. It was sort of fun because like I would try to figure out the technology side, and this one's pretty close, but you'll notice I'll be making some adjustments to the text as we go through and look at it. But what we're going to do with the story this time, we'll pick up where we left off. So we kind of read through Sangba's boat. His son wrecked the boat. They lived in the interior and it was hard. So he sort of transports us way back. This is a really, really, really old story. Some of the versions of this story go back to around the time of the flood or somewhere in that neighborhood. So we're talking thousands of years. And so what we're going to do is we'll listen to him read it, and then we'll look at the sentence, and I'll ask one of you to read it. And then we'll look for, all we're looking for is any of these direction, location types of things that we've been looking at. But then I'm going to pull it apart. And there's different ways to pull apart Tlingit. And the reason why we pull it apart, it's sort of like if someone was like a master clockmaker, and we had to figure out how they were making the clocks. At some point, we'd have to probably take that clock apart. But, you know, the good side of that metaphor is we're not really taking stuff apart where we can't put it back together. Because if you take something apart and you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to, like if you took a watch apart, unless you knew how to build watches, you're not getting that watch to click again. But for us, we do that to figure out how are we going to put together our own language with the goal of just pushing for these bigger, longer strings of language. This is Shah Dagh, master storyteller, Robert Zuboff. And so that's kind of the plan. But I thought I'd turn it over, see if anybody has any thoughts or questions, anything you wanted to share before we got started. Oh, yeah. Yeah, kecha. How? Wasa yitlach. Hechwasaku a de to see ye by saknin. Just kat saknin. Tekach inach fry bread. I don't know how to make any other bread. Just I can make pancakes and fry bread. That's it. Anything else, I gotta get like one of those almost all the way cooked loaves from Costco. And I kind of feel like I'm baking bread, but my grandma used to make bread in like coffee cans. She had these coffee can bread recipe. Well, they're making the old, you know, they don't make those cans. Maybe U-Band still makes those cans, but and then she had a couple other really good bread recipes, but never got them from her. And one of my colleagues, he said, I'm baking bread if anybody wants bread. I was like, I'll take some bread. And it had like fancy leaf patterns on the top. And it was next level. ʼatutli.átk, the cooking master. So, okay. So yeah, naka. Oh, okay. Sourdough, okay. Oh, okay. There was a lady in Skagway, and we got some flour from her one time. I guess she got it from some of the churches. They keep stock supplies of, you know, I guess like in case something really crazy happens, they've got like this big supply of food, and some of it includes raw foods that you can. So they would be grinding their own, and so she would buy this stuff from them because they cycle it out, and then she would grind it up and make. And so I was like, what, you're grinding wheat? Like, again, like I don't have no idea. I wouldn't even know where to start. If you gave me like some wheat, I'd probably just try and throw it in the oven. Like, I don't know. Maybe you bake it before you grind it. I have no idea. Okay. Anybody else? Other thoughts, questions? Okay, a couple of things. The Alaska Heritage Institute has a lecture series this month. I believe it's at noon on, I don't have any info on it, but I'll try and get some for Thursday. I know that this week is not happening. There's a memorial for King Geesty, David Katzig. Also, I think it's on Thursday. Anybody see the time?
Yeah, it's at 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. There's a YouTube link, which I can put into the chat in case anybody wants to catch it. Also, this Friday at 7, we're hosting virtually Dr. Michael Yellowbird, who is going to talk about, it's the Evening at Egan lecture series, and his talk is called Mindful Decolonization, Spirits and Our Genes and the Science of Traditional Indigenous Contemplative Practices. So really cool. He's a neuroscience person. He knows a lot about that stuff. He talks about the science behind decolonizing your brain, which I think is really cool because he incorporates indigenous languages, meditation, a bunch of other things in there. I've heard him talk a couple times, really good stuff. So that's Friday at 7 p.m. I'll put the website to that in the chat. I guess while I'm looking, I should find the link for the Alaska Heritage Institute lecture series as well. I do know the City Assembly is hearing, I guess they're open to receiving some support letters for Alaska Heritage Institute and their arts campus, which could get them really close to their fundraising goal. Here's the lecture series. I think that's all my announcements. So unless anybody has anything else, questions, anything you've been thinking about in the language, we'll dive back into our direction location stuff.
Well, the assembly will be considering again the proposal for the youth homeless shelter.
Oh, yuck, yuck. Wonderful. Yeah, I had been around Juneau for an awful long time before somebody told me what the youth homeless situation was. And in terms of, it's a lot of couch surfing and other stuff like that. And I was really surprised to learn what a prominent problem this was. And also just knowing some of my relatives who ended up on the streets, living in a boat, and then like some bad spot downtown. And so it's wonderful just to be able to help people out. Sheesh. Anything else? Okay. Let's take a look at this box. Yeah, we don't need that. So here we go. So we're just situating things around this box. This box is our reference point for things to be around it. And so basically, to kind of recap, there's two kinds of things we're usually looking at here. One is a word, like in this case, ka, and then a suffix, that letter T, right? So that T means to be at, kind of just arriving at, right? So here, this is what we got. And so once we hear the cut part, we're just in our mind thinking like it's arrived on top of whatever the thing is, right? So that's what the T is doing there. And I think this is a T all the way through because our little cis is not moving, right? So even though the wings are up, it's just standing there. I guess I should try and put the wings. I'm trying to learn how to be an animator and an illustrator. It's really fun. So here we have kook. I don't know, did we do these ones already? Maybe I'll read them and repeat them if you want to. Kook katan wait sisko.
Kook
Kathan with sitsk.
Kuktayitan weitsisko.
ʼatutli.átk.
Okay, and in Klukwan, it's some speakers will say zisko instead of tsisko, and then they'll say tsisko for zisko. So in a lot of other places, this is a zisk and this is a tsisko. I guess I don't know how to do the owl thing, but yeah. Kukshikatan weitsisko.
Tehan.
ʼatutli.átk.
Kuktekan weitsisko.
Tehan with sitsk.
Okay, so this hun is a verb for one person to be standing somewhere, right? They're just standing somewhere. This verb is a little bit unusual because it's usually just hun. You don't really have like a past tense, future tense. It's like just right now. So he's inside and it's taped shut. Kuk toot hun weitsisko.
Tehan with sitsk.
Kuk okt hun weitsisko.
Tehan with sitsk.
And so this one, you're going to have this sound with the T right after it, which can be a little tricky. Kuk okt hun weitsisko.
Tehan with sitsk.
And kuk kat hun weitsisko.
Tehan with sitsk.
Okay, so this answers the question, gut sa hun. So if there's a T on there for the question, there should be a T on something for the answer, right? So if we go back, we see guk sa, and then these are all having this ending. If these says gu su, these are all having the or w ending. So the same thing. So now we're going to say guk sa gendekin weitsisko. So in this case, we have guch, so it's going along somewhere, right? So that's what these suffixes are usually doing. They're kind of telling us where is it and kind of where is it going, which in Tlingit has quite a few different answers. You know, it's not endless. There's only so many of these suffixes. So in this case, this one's a little different because we got to think about the concept here. And so sometimes these are pushing a concept, which are going to have to get us to think about things differently, like to be in something as opposed to inside. And this one is to go over something, okay? So this one on its own right here is kanach. And we're going to pay close attention to the tone and the vowel length, because sometimes those will change. For some, like that just flattens right out. Even though ka is high tone, nach is high tone, and then yandakin it's flying right now. One thing. Kuk kanach yandakin weitsisko. So now we have tayich, and I guess the box is floating. That's just, we'll just deal with that. It's suspended, it's magical. I don't know, whatever you need. Kuk tayich yandakin weitsisko. This one has some, so we changed from shuka to yanach, just because shuka means to be in front of. And if you're going to go along the front of it, that's not being in front of. So now the whole word switches. So this word is attaching nach, which is to go along or via or through, with ya, which is the face of something. And so this is the one you would use to say going past something as well. Chahiti yanach yandakin yachak. This eagle is flying past our house. Well, same thing. And so this was one, it took me a while to figure out how to, I had to go to a speaker because like someone asked me how to say something like, I'm driving past, or I think I was trying to say to my kids, like, we're driving past Super Bear, which I call it Tlingit hoots yan takuch. But I always call it Tlingit hoots for some reason. So my kids would laugh at me because it'd say, Sugar Bear? Why is it Sugar Bear? And I was like, I don't know. I said the wrong thing. Okay. So now it's going behind. Hook eich yandakin witsisko. Now it's going to go right through. There's a hole. And so this one, again, it's switching to nach. Just like conceptually, we got to just kind of get, you know, if the thing is just moving past. And so Tlingit codes a lot of information through these things. Hook to nach yandakin witsisko. Okay, so now this one, so this one was going over it. This one, it's going to fly to be on top of it, which we're going to see it change a little bit once it actually, you know, landing is different than flying, right? But we're saying, oh yeah, it's flying to be on top of the tail. We just know, maybe Tsisk told us where it's going, okay? So this one we have kade, because it's not there yet. And so if it's not there yet, it's pretty much, there's a bunch of things that are gonna switch to day, right? So for example, if I said, tell me, whatever, tell me about it. I would say, Khan Kananik or Achin Kananik. But to say, you will tell me in the future, Ide Kakrinik. So that changes to day, right? And there's a few of those ones. If you see in or eat in front of that verb, it's going to change to ide. And this is another one, so kade. Kuk kade yandakin weitsisko.
Hook kade yandakin witsisk. Is that the same kade as like when we're passing?
Yes. So at ku'ik, there's a number of really critical phrases that you use at ku'ik. Let me just make a new slide here. Oops, I didn't need these buildings. Let's try this one. Okay, so somebody's name, and this is one of the first things you hear at a ku'ik sometimes. Like, so once people start talking and using the language a whole bunch, let me change the color here. So this one, do you see one of those things that we've been talking about here? Day, right? So towards. And what is this a part?
Isn't that talking?
Not quite, but it's in that neighborhood.
Mouth.
Right? It's the mouth. So what you do is at ku'ik, they're going to bring, before the first meal is served, they're going to bring out the gun kasiki. So gun is the campfire, ka is on, sik is a dish, gun kasiki, right? So let me put that one above. Oops. So what'll happen is usually your Nakani and maybe one other person who's Qanate Kanayi, the opposite clan, is gonna hold that, and it's gonna have a little bit of those foods. Usually if you have one person or a group of people that you're kind of the ku'ik is for to help release the grief from those folks, you'll have some of their favorite foods there, maybe some tobacco, a whole bunch, just little kinds of everything that you were going to serve the people. and they eat first. You say their name, then you say ʼaide, to their mouth, to their mouth, to their mouth. And then after and then usually Clan X is hosting it. And it depends how they work. A lot of times they might do a whole bunch of preparations, say, read these names in this order. Other clans, they might say, no, let's just shout out some names. We got to remember all our ancestors and feed them. But then the one you're having that release of grief ceremony for, they will usually be last. And then often you'll say their name and ʼaide 4 times. Not all the time, but that's how I've seen it done. And now the dish is ready. It goes out. It gets completely burned. Now everybody else can eat. Oh, now the guests can eat. So if this was a raven party, every one of those wolves better have a plate before some raven starts eating, or else someone's getting balled out. Okay, so then when you bring out the money and you're gonna kill the money, usually everybody comes up. Usually your ʼatutli.átk comes up first. So ʼatutli.átk is that's your helping clans. So let's say this was a ʼshukach event. All the other raven clans would come up first. You know, whoever was in attendance, and they would put their money into the bowl, and then the ʼshukach would go last. The last, and then there's usually an order to these things as well. Like everybody goes, and then the big clan person goes last, or everybody goes, and the direct descendants or the closest family members perhaps go last. There's a couple different ways to go about it. Then, so those are called ʼatutli.átk. Those are your helping clans. So they're the same moiety, but a different clan, and they're expected to do some work too. So then you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna name maybe the same list of names, maybe a whole different list of names. But then usually these ones you're releasing the grief for last, and you're gonna say ʼkade. So that's how you kill the money. Same process. And so now the money has been killed. Donna would do a juk. It's literally what we say, kill that money. And it means you're separating it from yourself. And I've been at ceremonies too, where people think they're gonna reach back in that bowl and get their money. It's like, no, that goes to pay for the ku'ik, to pay your guests, to pay for all the people who, especially your clan opposites who did work. Don't pay yourself out of that money. Bad stuff gonna happen, okay? Protect yourselves, live. This is the way I was taught anyways.
People will never forget.
Yeah. And so here's another one. This one was fun. Let me check the spelling on this last part. Thought I'd be faster at finding it. Okay, well, I'll double check that later. Okay, so this one, so you would say the person's name, and they are there. They are one of the guests, and you would say, Anybody ever hear that one?
Yep.
So this one has 2 of those things that we've been looking at. Ye, we haven't looked at that one yet, I don't think, is below, and then day. So day would mean to go under their mouth. So this is when they bring out the bowls of fruit. And so you would yell out someone's name. You say, so this means, so if we called someone out, called out somebody's name, and then we would say to their, right below their mouth, dukwak with their gang. So that's kind of what the kwaku is like. It's the ones you roll around with, or that you roam around with, right? Your partners. And so this, and then they would bring and everybody starts pounding on the table, and then they bring the thing over, and everybody, it's pretty hysterical. Yeah, you just try and grab as much as you can. It's it's a lot of fun. It's a really fun part of ku'ik. But this is where you see how these things you can see all these parts built into this. And a bunch of us have probably just been saying this stuff. And it's great because you know to say it, but now this is how it breaks down. Now you can see all these parts. Day. Another one. So you say, hot day, right? Bring it here. Really, you only say that in ku'ik. If you know someone really well, you could say it, but usually you would use something a little more specific, like hand it to me or bring it here, but you'd use it doesn't have a verb on it, right? Okay, sheesh, good question. So yeah, now it's going right in between them. And then now we get a different verb. We get a T ending because it has happened, right? It arrived there. And then we're going to get this verb, which means for a bird or airplane to land, or for a bird to be sitting, or for a person to be squatting. In some cases, it could be perched. And in some cases, this is also the verb you would use in a different way, but to talk about an octopus walking. So it has all of those sort of uses. So in this case, kat wujakak weitsisko.
Kat wujakak weitsisko.
Okay. So there it is. There's our, so we did, on this slide, we did our apple. We did our, so we did guksa, gusu, and we switched to the tsisk, and we got gutsa and guksa. So you could do a couple others. The visuals might not work as well. Gudesa, where is it going? Gudachsa, where is it from? Gunachsa, where did it go through? Any questions about that? Okay.
This will be on Tlingit language.
Yeah, it's up there now without this, but I'll try and clean this one up and make its own little handout. Like maybe I'll just work on a common phrases at ku'ik handout.
Pretty amazing. Some of that I've known from living in that, but I've never known the detail until now. So that's pretty awesome there, Lance.
Yeah, sheesh. And so the is the mouth. So you can say eit to arrive at the mouth. So I could say which means listen at my mouth, which means listen to me. But that's kind of, you got to make sure that those are people you could boss around when you say that. You can also say duchede, feed them, right? You could say duchnate, feed them on a regular basis, right? You can also say, I could say du'ani kaudanuk achsai kuch edach owe. My name is Du'ani Kaudanuk, and it's from the mouth of Johnny Marks. So chedach could be where you heard it from or who said it. Chenach is through the mouth of, and that if you put Tlingit Nov in Tlingit language, de kinach enach in Haida language. So that's all of those are plus one of these de dach nach t things. So you can see them all over.
So is Enoch the same as like saying to knock? That knock is the same?
It's the same one.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
go, nach is through or along or via. And we'll see pretty soon another nach that's a little bit different, but is probably related to, it's probably the same thing, similar thing.
That Jinda was pretty surprising. That's also my great auntie's name, and I never knew the meaning of that till now.
Yeah, I know it's a Kagwantan name. I know someone who has that name now. So yeah, it's really cool. And so if you want more of these phrases and in the context and a lot more of these terms, read the introduction to Hatu Nagu Yis by Nora and Richard Dowenhauer.
Sounds good.
So here is the napkin. So I guess I need to make a visual out of this, but this was would teach 6 hours a day for 3 weeks at these camps and tests. And we're probably gonna try and run another camp in this coming summer, just like a 3-week smash through a whole bunch of stuff. Because even if you've learned this stuff before, I think if you just keep going through it and keep trying exercises to use it, you can help teach it to other people while also just continuing to reinforce it within yourself. So these are all bases. So these all can take a suffix. So you can say kadach, and you could say cut, and you can say yikt, you can say yikdach, yikde, tude, tudach, tudach, tut sometimes. Talk, you could say talked. It's a little less common. You could certainly, if something fell to the bottom of a cliff in like a little canyon, that could be talked. Talked with a geet, a talk. And then ye, same thing, yidach. So as far as like, what are these things? Just general sort of categories. So ka is on something. It's also in a spillable container. So I just spilled coffee on myself today trying to carry my kid and the mail and something else, and like not using a cup with a lid, which I should have known better. And then an open container is also ka. Yik is floating in the water, in the shallow water, not really a river, but in the shallow water, in a tree, in a forest, in the road, and in a creature's body where the organs are. So if you found yourself in a whale, you're like, huh, ya yik yachatyati. I yicked into the whale. Jonas did it, Raven did it. See, it happens, right?
That's what you did technically, yeah?
Yeah, Chone, I was yikdach, I came out of that whale. Pinocchio, he was in a whale. Tu is in a closed container or sometimes in an abstract thing. So if it's getting into an abstract concept, it could be tu. A box with a lid. People, like in your mind or your thoughts or your emotions, that's all tu. Abstract concepts, like, I can't think of any other, but we'll probably see some that pop up, right? And then talk is bodies of water, lakes, rivers, ocean, but it's down at the bottom of it. Holes, pits, cavities, canyons.
So is that where that Shu talk gets that name?
No, that one is actually Shituk.
Oh.
Hammer nose, the raven's hammer nose. That was
Okay.
the name of that rock that was up above in
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then ye is a building or a home. but this one's a little tricky. So usually you're outside of it when you use that one. But this is one you could use to talk about a clan house. I've heard people say things like "yechit yidach" from inside the Raven house, just as far as like introducing yourself. So here's your napkin categories. Shkuyel, Tim Hall, Shakau Ish, Devlin Anderstrom, and me. I think Zeosh James Crippen was there. And we're just trying to sort of sort these things out in our mind. And it's always important to remember these things don't work the same as in English. And so you're just going to have to, sometimes your brain is going to want to battle. It's like, no, that's not on, that's in. It's like, yeah, in English, we're not talking about English. Okay, Nick A. Any questions? So let's look at our third set here. These universal points in the Tlingit consciousness. So we did relative to the speaker, right here, over there, way over there. Then we did relative to two objects. So under, over, around, those types of things. And so now we're going to look at these fixed points. So it doesn't need to belong to anything. Some of these are pretty big concepts. So we're going to start walking through them. And so basically, my advice for learning this stuff is we're going to find some of the ones that are most common. Day and dach are probably the most common. Nach is up there, and so is the T. The underline X one, it'll pop up now and then. Oh, and I see a question in the chat. Yeah, when people say wasa ʼatutli, like how is your inside? And so it does have a little bit more emotional emphasis, but it can also be interpreted as what do you want? Because I could say yewa ʼatutli, and that, but this is related to the tu. It could mean my thoughts, my spirits, my emotions, my intentions, my desires, it could be any of those things. So there was King Geste. He told us one time, he said, if you don't know him, you shouldn't be asking tuati. You should be asking wasaiati. Because it might be interpreted as like, what do you want? Right? And just in terms of like different nuances in the language, which is English takes care of that through tone, I guess. Like I could say, what do you want? And what do you want? And those are two different things, right? And Tlingit does that through these particles. But similar to that one, you could say, yuqatan. That's a command form to speak. But I could say yututan. That's a command form for think. So for that one, tu and che, and there's a number of these, da, tu, ka, ya, ka. What you're going to find is those can be situated right on the front of a verb, and those will change the way the verb works. It's really awesome. Okay, so yeah, and so ʼatutli usually means I know you a little bit more, right? So, and that's just like how, and then wasashti denuk is also like how are you feeling? But it also, it's a situational thing, right? Like let's say somebody just went through a real hard time, and when you saw them, and it's up to you. Like you might not even ask them how they're doing, because you might already know they're doing bad. But if you're a good friend of theirs or something, and you're checking in, wasa'yati, wasa'ituati, wasashti tanuk. It seems like you're getting closer and closer to them as you ask those questions. And so some of them, it's not just like when I was learning Hawaiian, they said, "Pahea oi," and that means, how are you doing? And then at one point they said, the answer to that is maikai, I'm doing good. It's just agreeing. We're not asking you how you're doing. We're just greeting. Don't launch into this thing, you know? And so I don't know if I shared this with you guys, but I went to a Subway sandwich shop one time, and I was like, hey, how's it going? And then the guy started to tell me how it's going, and I just like talked right over him with my sandwich order. And I could tell it kind of hurt his feelings, but I felt bad. But then I felt kind of upset. I was like, I wasn't asking. I was just saying, how's it going? Right. So anyways, in Tlingit, the way you talk about it, the emotion you put into it shows what your expectations are. Because another greeting is people just say, wasa. And that's always is an interesting one to answer, because wasa is just sort of like, how's it? Right? And so it doesn't always require an answer. Good questions. Yeah. So to start looking at this illustration, this one has nouns. So we'll just say them, and then I'll give you the translation. Chat,
Chats.
the sky. Keitleti,
Ketledi.
a seagull. Goose,
Goose.
cloud. Kakan,
Gagan.
sun. Shah,
Shah.
mountain. Oh, Kakan Khusi.
Gan. Kusi.
That's a sunbeam, especially one that's breaking through the clouds. Yai,
Yai.
it's a whale. Each,
Each.
this is a reef or a large, what would you call this in English? Like a big rock that the tide goes up and down on. It could even cover it, but at some point the tide uncovers it. That's each. Ton,
Tan.
sea lion. Niche,
Niche.
that is the beach. Heen,
Heen.
that's water or a river. And Nadayihin, Kanadayihin, Khatini, Heen Plain, all of those are rivers. Hinuk is, I think it's too small for any fish to be in. So it's a little creek, little tiny creek. Nadayihin and Kanadayihin, I don't exactly get the difference. I think Nadayihin is a flowing river. Kanadayihin is maybe a faster flowing river, maybe. Khatini is a river that has salmon in it, or fish. Heen Plain is a big river like the Chilkat, the Nas, the Arseich, no, I can think of it. Shtachin. So there's these really big rivers that are very important to Táax'aa. They're very important to Tlingit country, because you could transport a lot of stuff up and down. Let's see. Here's a fish. Chat.
At.
Askatu.
Askatu.
So that's the word for forest. Atkatu, you'll also hear. Asquani is more like the tree people. And this one has tu in it, right?
Right.
Okay, so the smoke hole, ganka,
Ganka.
over the fire, or maybe it's over the outside. It's hard to tell. Gankahati.
Gankahati.
That's the cover for the old smoke hole in the old houses. The house itself, hit.
Hit.
Kahat.
Kahat.
It's technically a chawush. Chawush is the doorway. Kahat is the door. Kutiya.
Kutiya.
It's a totem pole. Yak.
Ya.
There's the boat. Eight.
Ek.
It's salt or the seawater or the ocean. Sao.
Sao.
It's a Dungeness. Te.
T.
There's a rock. Okay, so those are nouns, right? So we're learning, those are the names of things. But the next step is trying to figure out like some of these directional things based on sort of just looking at the land. I think the starting point is you have away from the ocean, towards the ocean, out to sea, and then back to the shore. That's the centerpiece of where I think all of this is built off of. And what makes me think about that is, let's say you're standing here on the shore. Like you're this person, you're standing right here on the shore, right where the ocean is. Not the lake, not the river, but the ocean. If you got in a boat and you went out this way, you'd go, dock,
Dock.
dock.
Dog.
Also, if you put your hand like this and you extend your hand forward, your hand just went dock.
Dock.
Dog.
So dock is also in front of the body, sticking your tongue out, push, this is, if you can do the hokey pokey, they'll say, dakji shetsu, or what do they say? Daki shetsu yijin, kuchi shetsu yijin. Right, so that dock is in front of the body. If I held my hand out, and Halloween was just here, so let's make it kind of creepy, and there was a big spider crawling up my arm towards my body. That spider is going dock,
Dock.
dock,
Dock.
with the underlined K. So this is to go from the ocean up towards the forest, or up towards the land, or towards the interior, however you want to think about it. This is away from the ocean, and this is from the shore out to sea. Dock, 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 dock. These are opposite concepts. And we're going to take a close look at them in a second. If you were up here, and so they'll also say takte wugut. That's a code. It could literally mean they went up on the land. They went away from the water, but it could also mean they went into the forest. That's where that phrase comes from. They walked into the forest. That is a code for somebody passed away. You can also say hanak wugut. Nak is another one of those. It's a relational noun, and it means to leave something behind. So you'd say they left us behind. Dakte wugut, they went into the forest, they went up back into the interior. Because I think that's that old school way of thinking. We're from the interior, we migrated to the coast, the flood pushed us back, most of us, or half of us came back, and then you go back at the end. That's the old school way of thinking. So if you're in the boat, out on the ocean, you want to go back to the shore, that's yan.
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 Okay. If you're up in the interior and you want to go down to the beach, there's two ways to say it. For most northern Tlingit communities, it would be ʼatutli.átk. ʼatutli. If you're from Cake or the interior or southern Tlingit, you'd say ʼik.
Eek.
ʼik.
Eek.
Okay, so those are the ones we kind of start with. Dock, ʼik, dock, yan. All about where the ocean is. To the ocean, away from the ocean, to the ocean, or to the shore, away from the ocean, right? So it's kind of interesting because which one you use depends on where you are, right? So if you want to say go ashore, it's going to be yan. If you want to say go down the ocean, it's going to be ʼik. Okay, so just things to keep in mind.
What about along the shore again?
So if you're in a boat and you want to follow the shore, like let's say you're gonna go beachcombing for Quwukan, you would go yanch along the shoreline. So here, these can take those suffixes. So you could say yande, you could say dakde, you could say dakde. You don't really say dak though, because instead you would kind of use the opposite. They kind of tend to have some opposites sometimes. They're a little tricky, right? Diki is up above, Digi is down below. So there's another kind of matching pair. And this is generally what you're gonna see. The K sounds are going up, the Y sounds are going down. K, ye, Diki, Digi, Kina, Yina, right? And so there's gonna be a number of different ways that these get used and put together. A couple other ones, Deki is way out to sea. Diya is across a body of water. Naki is upstream or north. Ikki is downstream or south. I think those are the main ones I want to cover with this slide. Any questions? Okay, we'll run through just a few more examples and then we'll take our break. So dock and dock, these ones are pretty special and they have multiple meanings and uses, and they're the same word that have all these different interpretations. Depends on how they're being used. So when something goes dock, this usually implies, both of these imply like a change of state a little bit. So it could be going from the shore out to sea. It could also go from being in the shadows out into the open. So like, let's say you're sitting in this clearing looking for a moose and this moose comes right out of the woods. Dak uagut. It walked out into the open. Okay. It could also be for precipitation to fall. Siu dak usatan. Kleit dak usatan. That dak is this same one. And it could also be for something to go on top of fire, but that's the least common. You don't see that very much.
That's a question.
Uh-huh.
Interesting that siu daku sitan, given that the motion dock is out, siu is dock. That's different, where you would think that would be the key, you know.
Yeah, I think it could be related to the Tlingit understanding of the water cycle. So the water goes out to sea and then it circles back up into the clouds and then it comes down. And so it's really interesting. You know, you're going to see this one pop up in certain verbs too, where it's like, oh, why is it there, right? Kunachdak, I'm going to explain it to you. And so that it's almost like I'm going to tell it to you and it's going to come right out into the open, right? It's really interesting the way that these work. This concept of sort of emerging from the shadows, or sort of, it's all this kind of interesting cycle of motion.
Can you say that word? Sorry.
Say it again. Oh, okay.
I think I interrupted.
Oh no, David, go ahead, please.
I was just going to ask, can you say that phrase one more time about kunach?
Kunach, dak, kakkonik.
It's almost sounds like to me, I'm really going to tell you.
Yeah, but that would be kunach, but it's kunach. So the second
Ah.
is long, but it does sound like that. Yeah. Okay, so the flip side of dock is dock. So we're going to see the opposites. It's going, well, this one's not quite, I guess it's kind of opposite if you think of it as a reflection. So if someone was in a boat and someone was walking, they were both at the shore, they both left at the same time. One's going dock, one's going dock. Or one's going dock, one's going dock. So dock is up in the woods, away from the shore. And it doesn't mean to go into the woods even. A lot of times people will think of that, but at its core, it means to move away from the ocean. And that's why we call them Táax'aa Tlingit, our inland Tlingit people. They call us ʼatutli, on the ocean. It also means to go into the shadows or go into the forest, like go into the hiding. So like you could say dak ukut with zisk guk un. Kudach ishichiak dak ukut. So the moose came out into the open. Shoot it. You're too slow. It went back into the woods. And it could also mean up off of fire. I guess I need to add 2 more because it also means in front of the body and going towards the body. So it's a fun concept to just think about. So here's, to wrap this part up, here's our blank map. Here's Táax'aa. And so, good day sayana good Táax'aa. Where's it going? Where's it going?
Ik.
Ekte and a good. Right, so he's going ekte. He started dock, and then he's going ek because he's going that way. Good day sayana good ʼatutli.átk.
Dag day.
Yeah,
No good.
dock day and a good. Now he's going up away from the ocean. She. I don't know why it's gotta be he all the time. Good day sayana ʼatutli with Táax'aa.
Dock.
Yeah, away. Dock day.
Dag day.
Right? So dock day and the Táax'aa. So now squirrel is going from the ocean out to sea. So fun stuff. I think we'll take our break. We'll start looking at Táax'aa again. And then Thursday, when we pick this back up, we're going to look at some parts of speech that you'll find in place names like cliff, hill, mountain, just a little bit more sort of detail on landforms and sort of how they work in regards to this stuff. And then we'll start looking at a few more place names and just see how this stuff works. Okay, so take 5 and we'll come back in about 5 minutes. Sheesh. Okay, Yuhan. Any questions or anything that we missed going back to the direction stuff?
It seems like if you don't get that underlined sound very good, you could be in a tough situation in conversation, huh?
Yeah, sometimes, you know, like just getting those, is it a or a or, you know, those things can make a substantial difference. So yeah, as we look at those things, it's just more to think about.
Yeah, well,
There's so much to think about. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so like as far as strategies, like so we'll look at these pictures and talk about concepts. Then in How Samech Hayuchatangi, you can read the chapter that also explains the concepts. Then there's just these big lists of things. And so you're going to start with the things that are most common. Like we'll just start to see them. Dak, dak, de, dach, used a lot. And then we'll just see how, because what's interesting, it's not only where things are, but it's also when, right? So yidet yidach from now forward, and yidet yidei or chagudei, chagudach, like you'll see them used for time as well. So in Tlingit, time and space are really the same types of things. And so it's fun. And then sometimes you just got to not think about it and just go listen to someone tell a story. Go listen to a Tlingit speaker that you think is really good, and try not to stress about like uncovering every little particle. And it's not like you have to fully like get the complete translation of each of these things. You just got to get the big concepts and then start looking for them.
I think that's one of the challenges. I actually was reading a book on how to learn other languages, you know, I mean, from people who have learned multiple languages, but it's kind of, I think I get caught up on trying to, like, I don't know, organize my learning or something, you know, and I feel like there's so many pieces that I don't know, it's hard to kind of feel like I'm doing a deep enough dive in one area before we're moving to, you know, it's just hard. I'm trying to figure out the best method for learning.
Yeah, and we're going to kind of move along this sort of strategy path, but then you can always dip back into these other things. And so especially in between classes and stuff, is you might be like, oh, let me go back and look at these things again and make sure that I'm understanding them. And then it's really interesting because I think like teaching someone another language is really interesting because it's almost like I feel like I'm on the phone trying to tell someone how to swim. I was like, oh, okay, so you got to take your arm, and then at some point it's like, just go in the water, just get in the water, you know. And so, but that takes a lot to sort of just get there.
But you're right, because I felt I know like the study group helps a ton, but I feel like the thing that's missing is this regular conversation, you know, just regular conversation, practicing conversation. And I don't think that there's enough, or maybe I don't have the right enough audio ways of being practicing conversation, you know, and that's what I feel like is missing out of my learning.
Yeah, because if you learned a language somewhere where the language is spoken a bunch, is you're just gonna have to figure out how to communicate with people. And with Tlingit, like even what I noticed was among a lot of learners, and this is common for a lot of indigenous languages, is when two people see each other, like out in the community, there's no COVID or anything, like one person be like, wasa iti, yake, wa ekoa, wasa khatuti. What are you doing? Like, and so then they will switch over to English after that. It's a bit of a handshake, right? So it's like, hey, we'll say hi in the language, and then we'll switch over to communicate. And so one of the hard parts is you gotta push through that awkwardness, and you got to have teams of people that you kind of do that with. And then you also have to be uncomfortable with this really unknown area. Like, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, and I don't know if you're going to understand it, and you got to sort of just move around in that space. I remember the first time I went to a language immersion, like, I had such an intense headache because my brain was really wanting to communicate, and I kind of couldn't, beyond I'm hungry, what's this, what's that. You know, I had pretty limited language skills because I'd just been studying kind of by myself and in Skagway and listening to tapes and everything. But then when I actually got into this environment where there was, I think at that time, probably 20 speakers who were there with us, it was a real challenge. And then to also, I think that adult brain is really uncomfortable not knowing how to just do basic communication, and it's really shy about sounding silly, because you're like, you're just going to try and you'll throw a day on something or a dach, and then you'll just smash some things together. And I think you have to have environments where it's really safe to do that. And it's really, and people are going to focus on just trying to listen to what you're trying to say. Because I remember there were some speakers where really, I'd get really kind of heartbroken when they just say, tell me what you're trying to say, you know, and then I'll be like, I have to switch to English and tell them. And you know, I understand, because it can be frustrating. But yeah, we do need to explore that other component about how do we just gather in the language and do more stuff and be around it more.
One of the things we used to do, we used to have natives for sobriety with, remember when Paul Jackson was still with us, and so that was another gathering that we practiced, and we did it in a circle. But we also did a telephone tree, and we, you know, had, you know, where somebody had, we scheduled to, someone was supposed, you were supposed to call somebody, you had a person you were supposed to call, they were supposed to call somebody, and every week we had a different subject, you know, like, so we say, okay. I mean, and sometimes they were funny, because I remember one time, I remember Tommy Jimmy really messed up, and he was talking about toilet paper, and that's not what the subject was, but you know, so we kind of took a subject, so like, what are you eating, you know, or what are you doing, or just something, and it kind of helped us practice.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, it's so yeah, we'll look into that, about like, how could we create more of these gathering spaces, because, you know, like, we have the other Zoom room, and so maybe I need to promote that a little bit more, and maybe we need to just figure out, you know, so many things are virtual, but then a lot of us are on virtual calls all day long anyways. So it's tough to add like one more thing, but we'll see what we can do, because game nights could be fun, or just little, you know, there's a bunch of different things. Let me find these posters. I don't know if you folks have seen these.
Do you mind if I ask? I noticed that there's been some language learners like Ishmael, and there's a gentleman from Yakutat, and I don't know him, but I've seen him recently on Facebook, especially with sharing of videos after Kinky's Days passed. I don't remember him being a speaker before, and I've heard him speak at Celebration. I want to know how they learned so much, so fast. I just like, what's the key? That's what I've been wondering.
I've seen some folks who have been able to start talking in like a year or two. Shakao Ish Devlin, he's been going at it for quite a long time. But he lived with his grandma, or he spent a lot of time with his grandma, ʼatutli, Lena Farkas, and was in a mentor apprentice program, and was taking some intermediate and advanced Tlingit, kind of all at the same time. And so it's interesting too, because like learning styles come into play, just using the language, continuing to ask questions. But it would be good to maybe do a series of short kind of presentations or essays or something where they really talk about what they did. For me, I used to just make little flashcards of everything. And I wanted to just totally memorize the entire noun dictionary. And that's kind of where I started. But then I didn't know how to say things. And so then the phrase book came out. I wanted to memorize that whole thing. But then I realized like memorization has its limits. Even if you can memorize a whole bunch of stuff, it's sort of like if you're playing the card game memory, and then people just keep adding cards to it. And pretty soon you got like just this table full of cards, and there's like 1,000 different pairs. It becomes, after a while, you're just like, I just guess, you know? So to move beyond that, I think internalizing the grammar is a sticking point for a lot of folks, so that you can just sort of look at something and just recall it and be able to put these things together and say, oh yeah, it's this verb and I got to use it this way. So yeah, that's a really good question. And maybe I'll invite some second language learners to come and visit with us and just share their strategies. Like, what do they do on a daily basis, and what's their big picture of things as well. Okay. I'm going to teach.
I made a flip grid. It's a very short little conversation piece. Idana. And I did get one response this summer. So I put the link, which I think will take you to my place. And that's a way where I asked a question, and anyone who wants to can record an answer. So you record it on your phone with video and audio. So there's one technological conversation piece.
Okay, I'll check it. I think, yeah, it was, someone told me about Flipgrid, and so I talked about that, and someone told me about, there was another one I was trying out. So just sort of, yeah, different ways for us to interact. And it could be leaving video messages or voice messages, which is kind of interesting, because then you could have a conversation that way, where somebody has a recording and then someone leaves a response to it, and then someone adds to it. And so it's really fun too, because I know people, and we're friends, and we all talk. And we're like, okay, everybody, let's speak Tlingit. And then everybody's just super quiet. And all of a sudden, nobody knows how to talk anymore. But the other thing is just continuing to reinforce what we're pushing for is using Tlingit as our day-to-day language, just about everything, right? And so some of this involves demystifying what the language is. And I'm not trying to devalue it at all. But what happens to endangered languages is they're not spoken here, they're not spoken here, they're not spoken for this, then, you know, and then it becomes this language that's for sacred ceremonies. And then it's hard to use the language on just a regular basis, because people have these high expectations that it's this very spiritual thing. And it is, but it's also just a day-to-day thing, right? And so it's sort of like the ways some religions use Latin for ceremonial purposes. And then people they would have a hard time just speaking Latin, because everyone would kind of expect them to be giving a bit of a sermon or doing something like that. So I think there has to be this conscious removal of that idea to just say it's a day-to-day thing. You tell jokes, funny stories, share news, give updates, teach people how to do things. And so, and part of it involves that is just sort of pushing it away from this thing that's just too sacred to really mess around with, and to just mess around with it. Okay. All right. Good stuff, folks. So let's move back into our Táax'aa story. So this is where we left off. Oh, let me see. Am I still sharing the sound? Let's check it out. Okay, so this, so basically, so he just said it. So let me pull up the chat window again and the participants. So we just heard him say that. Does someone want to read this to us?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Yudaka ayaach yehavutich.
Sheesh. And do you see any of these directional things that we've been looking at?
Vutich.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, wutich. That one's a similar type of thing, but it's put this time onto a verb, which means it's functioning a little bit different. But dak plus ka gives you dakka. So dak is up in the interior, ka is on, dakka is in the interior. And so for Tlingit people, we start thinking of Tesla Carcross Atlan. As soon as we hear dakka, that's the communities that are up there. And then here's this, which is a suffix to be at somewhere, residing or at rest. So what Tlingit does here is, let me just fix a couple things here. I'll be working on reformatting this thing, just making it a little bit maybe easier to read.
Nice though.
Yeah, so the idea here, oops, is to show you here's the text. Here it is kind of what we call segmented, which means we're going to pull it into its parts. And then this is called gloss, which means we're going to show you what those parts mean. And there's kind of, this is what I would consider like a loose gloss. So I'm just saying like, here's the translation. A more tighter gloss would be, instead of saying this is, it would show you what the is and what the ya is. But when you put them together, it's sort of like this is. So there, residing, thus, us, we're at, repeatedly. So this means is we lived kind of all over in there, right? It's doing a couple of different things. This is a repetitive suffix that goes onto a verb. So the verb suffixes are different than this list of noun suffixes that we just looked at. So now we would say, is that a verb? Okay, now it's going to have a different set of suffixes. Okay, so let's listen to the next one. Somebody want to read this one? Sheesh. And any of those directional things, location things here?
Wuti is, oh no, that's a verb.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe same, residing there.
Yeah, so the is. So tlach is very, wutig is difficult. This verb root means frozen or hard. So wutig is one way to say difficult. Hakusti, our life, and it depends on how it's being used. It could be the capital concept, like our culture, our way of living, but it could also just mean our life, the life we had. And then so this is actually this one, which is a noun, but it means that place. So Tlingit does this a lot. So once he said dakka, now he'll switch to ach and ah, and he's referring back to dakka. So it's a pretty common thing that you'll see in Tlingit. So I'll just kind of give a short pause, ask a question if you've got it. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next sentence.
Yachat.
So I want to read that one. Okay, and any of these things that we've been looking at, these direction, location things here?
I don't think.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Right here.
Oh, I was thinking it was you. Well,
Oh, it's hard to hear you, sorry.
here, this will be better.
So this is one way these things can be used. This salmon, wechat, that salmon, right? And in this case, he's just sort of saying the salmon, right? So I want to read that one.
Ya'el kadak hake kechat yachat.
Okay. And do you see any of those directional and location things we've been looking at?
Yeah, the kadak is from.
Yeah. And then this is the on. So from on it or from on top of it, depends how it's being used.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the ya.
And then the ya.
Again, right? So this one needs a little help. Yeah, I kind of forgot. I started this a decade ago at least, so it's fun to sort of come back to it. It needs a little help. I don't think I'll do all of it, but so when we go through and look at it, eight kadach. So this can be combined, and he's saying et kadach. So he's saying it all as one sort of smashed up word, and so this is what's going on. There are a few common things. Like remember we talked about that te, and when you put a suffix on it, it goes long and low. The ka does the same thing. So ka will go to ka, dach, right? Ha'e ke chakch. It's like they swim right up to her mouth. That's really a cool concept, right? Yachat. But when you say ha'e ke chakch, you're not literally saying, but you're saying like they swam up and so we could eat them. No, here's the English. But you want to read that one? If you haven't read yet, give it a shot.
I'll do it. Aya klatak yaksaya ha chede yakwad.
Okay, sheesh. And any of those things here, the direction, location things?
Yeah, there's the ya, the da, the up. I'm not sure if that would
Probably just the ya here.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
even though this looks like one of those about things,
Yeah.
if you see sa shortly after, then you know it's actually the question one. Das is the question. And here's, when you have da sa, if you put anything in between them, this will change to dot. So in this case, dot, yach, saya is saying, what is it like? And so it's really cool. So in this case, he's saying, this is what is so good tasting to us, the salmon. A'aya is a bit of a storytelling thing. You say a'aya and a'awe. And there's different ways to maybe interpret those. I think of it as like, this is it, or that's it, right? But it depends on kind of how it's being used. Tlingit it's really like something. So yak'e means good. If you put ach'e or ha'e, yak'e, it means delicious. So you said, nayadi. Nayadi is really yummy to me, right? So that's how you say yummy. It's yak'e. And then this is ha, which could change to ach. Yachat, the salmon.
ʼatutli.átk. ʼatutli.átk.
Oh, I think we'll listen to it twice. That's fun. Someone want to read this one?
Kunach yatik kustiyo daka.
Okay. Any of the
Daka.
direction things? Yeah, dakka. That's the one, right? So here we have really difficult life over. Oh, here's you. So that one is as well. Way over there in the interior. So he's probably in Angoon when he's telling this story. So that's why he'd say you dakka, way over there in the interior. So we're looking at a few things here: word order, the spotting verbs, and we're keeping an eye out for these direction and location things.
Wat ik zei je scha aan kine. Wat ik zei je scha aan kine.
Can somebody read that one?
Wooch sayu Wooch isha ankini.
Sheesh. And this one, I guess there's one thing in here. So I'll give you folks a, because you might be looking for some things. And the y is really the only one that I see in here. So this one, what sayu. So here's another thing, like here's this wasa, that how type of question. But we saw the da sa, and neither of these are actually questions, right? So sometimes they can be used to form a statement. What sayu, how difficult it was there. And this is the y, could be putting us, he might be saying sayu, because it might be way over there, or it might be way long time ago, but in this case, it's both. Ja'a, wooch ischa. So there's a couple things going on here. Wooch ischa is people were eating each other. So there's a number of different things, but what this wooch is doing directly before the verb is saying to verb to each other. So wooch in acha would be people are eating together, and then wooch ischa is they're eating each other. That's a big difference. There's a big difference here, right? Antkini is the people of the village. And so there's the T is actually built into that word. If you pull it apart, on kin. Kin is the verb, is a verb root to sit, plurals to sit. So the people sitting at town.
What is
The
the
question-
e? What is the E doing in that sentence? Which E?
Oh yeah, good question. If there, so a verb is made up of two big parts, right? There's the stem and the prefix. The stem will contain the meaning, and the prefix will contain most of the information. Who's doing it? Who's it happening to? We're talking about like in the past, the future, or whatever. But if you have a consonant in the prefix, you must also have a vowel. So this doesn't mean anything. It's just what we call a peg vowel, like something has to be there. And so it doesn't mean anything, but it has to be there. So you'll see it sometimes, like they'll say, isqaq. And it sounds like I'm talking about you, but it just means it changes color regularly, like a fish, especially a sockeye or a coho when they go up to the fresh water. But yeah, that's a good question. It's a good spot. So when you see it, it looks like this. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you about Wooch. So Wooch is together, but the whoosh is coming together?
Wooch and whoosh are basically interchangeable. You're going to use wooch usually if the next sound is going to be a vowel, and it's going to be whoosh if the next sound is going to be a consonant, usually. But they're kind of interchangeable. On their own, they mean to each other. So I could say, whoosh wutudzatin, we saw each other. I saw you and you saw me. I could say, wooch tudzachan, we love each other. You love me, I love you. So we're doing the thing to each other.
Wooch kikyatki.
Wooch kikyatki, they are side by side. Wooch in means being together with each other. So now that could, and there's just a slight difference in sound, but a big difference in meaning. Wuchin yejitune. We are working together. Maybe I'm typing it up and you're drawing the pictures or whatever we're doing. Wooch jitudene. We're working on each other. Like I don't know, maybe we're robots. I'm gonna tighten your ear and you're gonna put the finger back on or whatever, right? And so that's a big difference though between wooch and woochin. So when you hear woochin in front of a verb, it means, oh, people are doing the verb together. But when you hear wooch right before the verb, they're doing the verb to each other. But then you can also have wooch as sort of like woochchan, next to each other, right? So it can pop up before some of these other things we've been looking at. Okay, good questions.
Kusakhakan kutsiti weka. Kusakhakan kutsiti weka.
Somebody want to read that one?
Kat
Ah,
kusakwan kudzati way go.
ah. Can you spot any of those direction location things?
Like
There's only one.
ku
Weh.
way.
That, right?
Weh.
So pulling it apart, kusakakwan is a compound. It's made up of a verb and a bit of one of these relational nouns. It's a really interesting term. So kusaka as a verb means to eat people. So it's a pretty big concept, right? Because shouldn't be eating people. Then kwan is people of an ancestor, they're ancestrally connected to a place. So it's really interesting that they get their own sort of, it's kind of a big name, like Kut Kwan and Sanya Kwan and Kusaka Kwan, I guess, right? So there must be something in the Tlingit mind where it's like, once you eat people, now you become like this whole other member of this other group. And that's how, go ahead.
I was going to say, kusawa is the difference with the wa and ha. How does that?
What is kusawa?
Kusawa, like the people from the area up by Champagne.
Oh, okay. Well, so this k pops up on the front of a verb. And one of the tricky things is there's two different k. They sound exactly the same. One means people, and one means just some given space. So when you say wasaqawati, you're saying, how is the weather? But if you said wasaqayati, how, it's a weird question, but you're saying, how are people? You're like, I don't know because I can't ask them all. But there are some times where you're going to see those differences. Kuwake, the weather's good. Kayake, people are good. Again, probably a generalization. But if you had kusawa, it's probably totally different. And so I'd have to take a look at it. But in this case, this k is people. Because you can't really eat a given space. Right? I guess you could, maybe if you're like some kind of monster or something. Yeah, but here, oh, this verb right after, kudzati. So these k, those are two different ones, right back to back. This one's people, and this one's this given space. We call it the aerial. It's another fun thing to think about. There's probably a related term, which is k as a noun, which is a cove. But you're going to see it all over the place. So we know the verb yati, to be. We know the verb siti, to be a member of a group. Now we get the verb kudzati, to exist. From that, we get kudzati, to be born, and kusti, life. All of these are related concepts, but Tlingit, what it does is it'll take a verb root, and to make verbs out of that root, you could change the classifier group, or you can put nouns on the front of it. Sometimes you can add a few words in front of it in a special combination. Those are the main ways you make different verbs out of the same root. And then wegao could mean like that drum, or it could mean that time. It just, you get it from the context, right? I think we have time for one or two more.
A'awe atayo ʼatutli.átk ya iskade hauskase. A'awe atayo ʼatutli.átk ya iskade hauskase.
Can I get a reader? This will be the last one.
A'awe adayu ʼatutli.átk ya iskade hauskase.
Sheesh. And any of those direction, location things in here.
Ada?
Yes. Around it, about it. And there's...
Awe?
Yep, we. So again, like awe is that is, but it also has lots of other, like when you say awe, it's sort of like you're saying like, that's it, right? And then you just sort of, but it's a narrative device, so we don't always look at the meaning, we more look at the function of that one. Then there's one more.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, there's two more. Yes, great. So yeah, is here or this.
Kade.
Yes, ʼatutli.átk, right? So ʼatutli is towards, to the ocean. But when you say ʼatutli, in this context, he's talking about getting to the coast. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's packed into the story, because this story situates itself into these major Tlingit migrations, primarily going inland for the flood, coming back to the coast. So all the Tlingits were living inland at the time this story's taking place. He's setting a lot of this stuff up at the beginning. And as we look at it, so ada, about it. So Tlingit just constantly does this as well. So you name what the thing is, and then you use it's, and you just keep referring back to it. You don't have to keep naming the thing, right? So when we go back, he's talking about the cannibal being around, how hard life was, people were eating each other, and then he says, we always talk about it. Wooch, that comes after a verb to mean the verb keeps happening. And then this one, ʼatutli.átk, you ʼatutli.átk, we are talking, we're conversing. We're always conversing about it. And then he names it right after. Ya ʼatk, to the coast, ha wushkasi, we migrated, right? Fun stuff. So it's really fun to look at these stories, because like we listened to it, we read it, now we're coming back in and we're looking at these direction location things. Well, we could come back in again and just look at the verbs, because it's sort of like, as we talked about, like your path of learning. The proposed sort of path is, at the beginning level, you're memorizing a bunch of stuff, you're learning nouns, you're learning how to make the sounds. At the intermediate level, you start learning how to change the nouns a little bit. You also start learning about these direction location things. And then you're sort of saying, okay, let's learn about everything up until the verbs. And we're going to look at verbs. But then once we start to get a feel for everything else that's out there, then we're going to shift our focus to mastering how verbs work, which is a bunch of work. There's a bunch of things that are packed into there. And then there's a whole bunch of other conceptual stuff. But that's why these stories are just so precious, because we could just keep going back in. We could look at this one story and we could spend a whole month like just talking about this one story. And then we're going to know this story. Then we're going to know the language that's going on in there. And it's going to help fill our boxes with stuff. Okay, Ganesh, one last announcement I'll remind you folks on Thursday is we won't have class next Tuesday. So next Tuesday is the annual Power and Privilege Symposium for the University of Alaska Southeast. It's a day that the university just sets aside to talk about power, privilege, race relations, gender relations, LGBTQ plus communities, and just a day to sort of reflect on how this stuff affects education, access to education, the way the university operates. So I'll share the schedule with you folks on Thursday so that you know about it. Reminder, Dr. Michael Yellowbird is presenting on Friday at 7 p.m. The science of decolonization. He's a really cool guy. And then King Gayste, his memorial is on Thursday. It's through YouTube. Yeah, so also a number of you folks. So Thursday will be the time to promote if you're doing a power and privilege presentation or session. And so let's talk about that a bit more on Thursday. I hope everybody has a good night, stays relaxed, and Ganesh Chish.
Ganesh Chish.
Kune. You got a moment after class?
Just a quick one.
Okay.
Let me stop.